Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Read and Reread. I am Angelia, and today it is time for Friday Reads. So I hope you've been having a good week. I have quite a few books to talk about this week. I think last week I didn't have that many, and then there was some kind of a reading explosion occurred. So we're going to get into that in just a second. If it's kind of weird and shadowy in here today, it's because it is rainy today. It's kind of dark. It dropped about 20 degrees. I think it was in the mid 80s yesterday. Today it's like, I don't know, it's 63 or something like that. Anyway, it's kind of cool and rainy. It's kind of nice autumn weather. So I am not complaining, but it might be a little dark and sinister looking here on the video. I don't know. I look like a ghost in most of the videos anyway, so what can I do? All right. And TV, the best thing of the week has been Bodies. It is so good. I think we only have, I have to see how many episodes there are. I think we only have one left. I think the last one is tonight. And that has been really good, really engaging. It is, I talked about it before a little bit, but in case you haven't seen it, it is on Netflix. I don't know if it's either 8 or 10 parts. I don't know. Anyway, it is there's 4 different time periods and a detective in each time period. And each of them is on the case of a body that suddenly appears in the same alley in London across all these different times from 1890 to 2053. And in each case, the detective gradually realizes there's something really weird going on. And I don't want to tell too much about it, but it is a time travel story. And what makes it good? Oh, first of all, I like that kind of thing where there's multiple storylines, multiple narrators and points of view. I like a good twisty science fiction. I like time travel. I like stories that are a little bit hard to wrap your head around. But also this has like really good character development. Each of the detectives is a really interesting person with their own challenges going on, maybe secrets, personal conflicts, and each of them you are rooting for in different ways. And so that makes it really good. The cast is strong, and I don't know how it's going to end. I'm just along for the ride, but I highly recommend. If any of that sounded good to you, try this show. Baking show is still going on. We are almost at the end of Bosch Legacy, which is not a very good season. It's pretty absurd plot. And we finished the morning show, which also was completely bonkers and off the rails. So that sums up the television viewing. Now let's move directly into these books. And I decided today to just, instead of go in order of what I've read, I'm going to do the nonfiction and then the fiction. Since it is Nonfiction November, I have been reading more nonfiction than I usually do in a month. And I've been having a good time with it too. So I did finish Square Haunting by Francesca Wade. If you like to read about literary history, I recommend this book. It's a feminist perspective about 5 women who lived in the same square in London, Mecklenburgh Square, between the world wars. And they didn't live there at exactly the same time, but some of them actually lived in the same flats as other people did at different times. Some of them knew each other or their paths crossed, some of them did not, but all of them were dealing with similar issues of being an independent and creative and intellectual woman at that time when those qualities were not supported or valued. They had various challenges with their family, with their people that they were in relationships with society in general, to pursue their scholarly ambitions or their creative ambitions. And they carved out lives for themselves in different ways. And it's just a really interesting look at their personal struggles and achievements. And this all kind of in this one very creative time period. And a lot of other interesting people that you would be familiar with kind of come in and out of the plot because of the circles that they moved in. So I found this very interesting and enjoyed it a lot. And I'm going to come back to it and finish reading that part about Dorothy Sayers after I read Have His Carcass. Right now I'm embroiled in a customer service problem because I ordered I ordered a hardback. They sent me a paperback and they're not responding to my queries. So I want to speak to the manager, but I'm going to read that book pretty soon. I might end up having to read this copy they sent me while I'm waiting to solve the problem, but we'll see. All right, so next I went a entirely different direction and I read this graphic memoir, Messy Roots by Laura Gao, and the subtitle is A Graphic Memoir of a Wuhanese American. Laura was born in Wuhan, China, and she was raised there by her grandparents until she was about 5 or 6. Her parents were already in the U.S. Pursuing their graduate degrees, and then they sent for her to join them at that time. So she had the immigration experience of not really knowing her parents, not knowing the English language, but she, gradually adjusted to her new family structure, and then her little brother also was born, and she began to grow up here in the U.S. The family eventually moved to Texas, and this is where the story gets very familiar because she went to Capel High School, and that is an area it's in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. It's kind of closer to Fort Worth, and it is a kind of an upper middle class, I think I would say mostly white, pretty conservative, pretty Christian kind of area in Texas. And that's what she talks about in the story, about growing up in a high school that had very few, well, first of all, her younger grades, very few Asian kids. And she even does a map about the different parts of town and what the composition of it is, and how she never really felt entirely comfortable. She's also dealing with the beginning of questioning her sexuality, but she doesn't really explore that too much until she gets to college. And so it is a growing up, a coming of age, and a coming out story as she tries to find who she is and how she fits in and how she wants to fit in or doesn't need to fit in different aspects of her life. But it was kind of funny to read all of the references and the disses of that part of North Texas, and they were legit. And also, I got to wondering as I read this, because she kind of had that traditional experience of the strict parents, the Chinese parents with high expectations that have sort of a limited menu of career opportunities that they want her to consider. And she doesn't feel that she can come out to her parents. And they're religious, they're conservative. And I've read a number of memoirs and also fiction books that kind of have this family structure. But my question I was wondering was, as we move forward in time and the young people who are writing these stories grow up and have their own families, how will this narrative change? But I did enjoy reading it. Graphic novels are not my most common form of reading, and I actually have a comprehension gap sometimes where something is conveyed more in the picture than the words, and I have to go back and read it more than once because I missed something, because I'm just not I guess I'm not graphically as literate as I am word literate. So that's always an interesting experience when I read something in a graphic format. But so I enjoyed reading Messy Roots. It was a very fast read. And the nonfiction book that I'm currently reading is I Am 17 Brushes with Death. And it's very episodic. This is, for me anyway, this is not a memoir that you just read straight through, start to finish, as an entire book. It's more like a collection of essays or vignettes, and for me, they're working better to read just one at a time and then go read my fiction book for a while, because each one is very dramatic. her style of writing, and they're good and they're interesting, but each one is so dramatically presented that to read them all in a row would be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. It'd be like, I don't know if you've ever known a person in your family or at work who seems to have a never-ending series of disasters. And so maybe you see them after you haven't seen them for a year or all summer. You go, hey, well, what's been going on? And then they tell you, and it's just like one thing after another. You cannot believe all those things happen to the same person. That's what it would feel like if you just read this book straight through. You'd wonder how on earth could all of this have occurred, and why is she still here? But if you spread it out, for me, it works a lot better. And this is about different times in her life when there's sort of a brush with mortality. Another reason to spread it out is there's a lot of themes that go with these different incidents. Like the very opening story is a very gripping one about a time that she met a creepy stranger on a hiking trail. I don't want to give too much away, but there's a lot in there about intuition, about being believed when you tell a story, about fate and those split-second decisions and close calls. And it's really a chilling little story. Other stories have different topics and themes. Some of them I think could probably be disturbing depending on your own experiences. There's stories about not being taken seriously in a medical setting, and childbirth complications, pregnancy loss, just different serious themes that can happen over the course of your life. One thing that did jump out at me so far, and I'm almost halfway through. There was a part where she's talking about, let me put this down, what her personality was like as a child. If you have read The Marriage Portrait, you remember how Lucretia as a young child is described. And she's described as being just like a real handful, very intense, very sensitive, high energy. She's a runner, she's a screamer, all that. And that is exactly how Maggie O'Farrell describes herself as a young child. She talks about how she was, which she's partly from memory and partly from her mother's account, and what, that she was just a difficult one. And then one of her kids is kind of this type of personality as well. And I thought she definitely, I feel like she borrowed from herself to imagine Lucretia as a young girl. So that was kind of fun to encounter. So I'm moving along in that, but I'm definitely going to take another week to read it because I'm interspersing it and only reading one or two of these a day, along with whatever else that I'm reading. Looks like I have gold hair on one side and silver hair on the other. Maybe I do, but it just looks funny. I don't know how it's going to come out in the video. I don't care. Let's talk about the fiction. So I read 2 books this week, and the first one was Maurice by Ian Forster. And this was the last novel in this little omnibus of 3 novels that I've read all of them or reread them this year as part of the Forster read-along. Maurice was written in I think around 1914, but not published until 1970 after Forster's death. And at the time that he wrote it, he circulated it to just a few close friends who gave him a lot of positive feedback about the novel itself, but pretty much concurred that it could not be published at that time. And so it sat in his home for many years and was published after his death. And it is the story of a young man named Maurice who comes to realize that he is gay. And it is about his first true love, and then some subsequent things that happen as well. I don't want to give too much away. It's a fairly short novel, and for me it had some surprises because I kind of forgot about all the things that happened. But of course, this is a time when this was frowned upon, not accepted by society, actually illegal. And so his struggles not only to like anybody growing up and going through your teens and early 20s, looking for love and relationships, but realizing that it would have to be covert, that this constant feeling that maybe he's wrong or unnatural, and just having to eventually work through all of that without a lot of support from anywhere to become true to himself. It was interesting to read it again. I'm reflecting on where it ranks now that I've gone back through the novels, and I read four of them in full. One I DN no, two I DNF'd. So those are obviously not my favorite ones. But of the four that I read in full, we can eliminate Where Angels Fear to Tread, because that was okay, but I didn't love it. So that leaves me with A Room with a View, Howard's Inn, and Morris to consider. I mean, I don't have to rank them, but if I did, which one is my favorite? Second, third. I'm not prepared to go on the record with an answer to that. Um, if you'd asked me before, I would have said A Room with a View, but it might be Howard's End. And then I don't know what's in second place. I don't know. Interesting thoughts. But let's move on because I'm not ready to answer that question. The other novel that I just finished last night was The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. And I read this for the band book club at the public library. And so that's coming up on, I think Wednesday is that discussion. And I didn't go last month. Last month was Lady Chatterley's Lover, and I never was in the mood to reread that. So I just bailed and didn't go. But I really wanted to go this time. And this was a book that I've wanted to read for a long time. I felt like it was sort of a missing piece. There's several Toni Morrison novels that I would like to get to. I've read some. The only one I can say I really love is Beloved. And then I've read a couple that I liked, appreciated. I see what the big deal is, etc. And this is going to be one of those. This book is a really tough read. Thank goodness it is small because it is highly concentrated. It's heavy. It's dark. It's disturbing. It's a lot of things. And I cannot say that I enjoyed the experience of reading it, but it is beautifully written, and I'm really glad that we're going to discuss it because it is a great book for that. And I'll be glad to have some other people to talk to about the experience of reading this book. It's kind of interesting. I was reading this, and of course, this is a banned book club, and part of one of the people that hosts this that works at the library, she always looks up what were the challenges, what's the history of it as a banned book. So I'll be interested to hear what she says, because I just found out yesterday. I read a news story from my previous town that I lived in the school district that I retired from, and they had been embroiled in the whole thing where a parent group keeps showing up and launching book challenges, and they have removed a ton of books from their libraries this year. It's pretty sad. I mean, they were challenged with 70 something books and they took out 65 and they kept two, or just a pretty abysmal record. But this is one of the books that they removed from their libraries. And as I read this book, I can clearly see what the content is that somebody might be concerned about, but I can also see how in the hands of a competent and thoughtful high school teacher, this could be a really rich and amazing book to read and discuss, especially like in an AP English class. I can really see it being a powerful experience there. But there's a lot of things in it. There's a lot of heavy content. There's sex, there's rape, there's incest, sex workers, family abuse, animal abuse. It's racist incidents. It's a heavy book, but it is beautifully written. It is basically about, there is a girl named, I don't know if her name would be pronounced Pecola or Pecola, But she is a poor black girl in the 1940s. Her father is an alcoholic. Her mother works for a white family and is not very forthcoming with love as either. And she feels ugly, and she feels like the only way she would be beautiful would be if she had blue eyes. She prays for blue eyes. She thinks that if she had blue eyes, everyone would see her as beautiful, and she would see the world as beautiful through those eyes. And there's a lot of exploration. What I liked in this book was that exploration of the concepts of beauty and society's messages of what is beautiful. And there's another character named Claudia, who's another little girl who's given white baby dolls, and she doesn't love these dolls or want them, and she takes them apart and mutilates them because they're just objects to her. She doesn't want to play at motherhood, and she especially doesn't want to play at motherhood with a blonde, blue-eyed baby doll. And the adults criticize her and think that she's bad, she's unnatural, what, she's not going to be a good mother, how could she act like that? And just all these concepts of beauty. There's a scene where Piccola goes and buys some candy, and she's so cowed down and shy that she can't even ask for what she wants. She just points at it, and it's these Mary Jane candies. I'm going to put a picture up here because I didn't know this is a candy that's still around, but it's a candy that has a little white girl on the wrapper, and she thinks that little girl, that's why she likes the candy, because this little white girl. And it's kind of a heartbreaking book. But something that was interesting to me was I was reading it, and it was a tough read, and I felt it wasn't the kind of book where I was like, "Ooh, I'm going to get back into my book." I kept looking at it and thinking, "How much longer? This is rough." And then I read the afterword that Toni Morrison wrote, because this book came out in 1970. She wrote it in the mid 60s, and then she wrote an afterword to this edition in 1993. And she has a really interesting analysis in the afterword about what she was thinking about and what she wanted to say. And then she kind of acknowledges some weaknesses in her own book, that things that didn't quite come through the way she intended. Very good. It was like a really good structural criticism of the novel. But she kind of identified my problem in reading, is I kept thinking, this is really wonderfully written, and this story is so compelling. Why am I disengaged? Like, why am I observing this from afar and not feeling eager to get back to this book? And I think this might be it. She says, one problem was centering. The weight of the novel's inquiry on so delicate and vulnerable a character could smash her and lead readers into the comfort of pitying her rather than into an interrogation of themselves for the smashing. My solution: break the narrative into parts that have to be reassembled by the reader. Seemed to me a good idea, the execution of which does not satisfy me now. Besides, it didn't work. Many readers remain touched, but not moved. And I think that might be it. It might be the structure that distanced me from staying with this character and seeing the world through her eyes more in the novel, because we move around. I was able to latch on better to Claudia and her parts than Piccola, even though I wanted to understand her better. And I really didn't care for reading the whole segment where we see things through her father's point of view. But, Toni Morrison didn't write this book to be comfortable or to make me comfortable or to, take this one person and put them over there for the hating. Like, she really puts you through it and makes you engage in a lot of difficult parts in this narrative. And it's ugly. A lot of ugly things are exposed. So it's a book where I'm glad I read it. I really appreciate it. Did not enjoy my personal reading experience, but some books, that's kind of the point. So I'm really looking forward to talking about this with a group in this upcoming week. If you've ever read this book, let me know what you think as well. And if you want to recommend something else, I've read a few of her books. Um, but there's some that are often mentioned that I also have not ever read. All right, that was it. I'm going to read one of my other books that I had chosen for Indigenous authors next, and I have two on deck. Moon of the Crusted Snow by Wabgitchig Rice and Ragged Company by Richard Wagamace. So I am going to look at both of these, maybe read the first page or two and see which one feels like the mood. And that's what I'm going to read on this rainy weekend. They both have to do with some kind of Arctic front coming in, so I can hunker down here and appreciate that I just have some 60-degree rain and not an Arctic front. So I hope you have had a great week. Let me know what you're planning to read this weekend and what else is going on. And I will be back soon on Tuesday. And I am not sure. I need to look through. I think I might have a tag. Was I tagged? I might have been tagged. I'll have to see what I have in store for Tuesday. But have a great weekend, and I'll see you soon. Bye.